I also have a book that is published. It's called Organized Common Sense: Why Project Management Matters and Why It is a Life Skill. And it is written at the level of a high school student, where except for the lack of experience, professional experience, most of my high school student candidates are ready to take PMP, almost at that level. And I did talk to PMI regarding these things, and then that's when there was a huge effort that was done, and they introduced what is called a PMI ready, which is you don't have you one step before even CAPM. That was started. I did contribute to that initiative as well. So this book is talking exactly about that. But let me switch right now into the actual presentation of why discipline agile. If you look at the world today, there is a lot of accelerated changing that is coming up. Businesses are constantly being changed and challenged because of many things that's happening in the world right now, right? And that's a given. And people are always coming and asking us, like, let's do something better and stuff like that, which means it challenges the ways of working. And this is one of the PDU talent triangle element, which is the power skills, the ways of working. So it comes and says, how do you work together? Even agile, several years back, they said, like, co-location is the main way of doing things. But even they have come back and recognized, like, businesses are going to do what businesses expects to be doing. As a result, you can come and co-locate everybody. And COVID put a big reality check on them. Even if businesses want to do it, it's not possible to do this. And this has been talked 30, 40 years as part of virtual teams. Virtual teams is not something that happened because of COVID. This has been present for a number of years, in fact several decades. But then we didn't practice the right way. We said everybody has to be present at the same room, same place, and same area. But we forgot that why businesses exist as a result of that. And rapidly emerging disruptive technology, drones delivering work, many other ways of actually performing our work that we never even thought of. Robots actually performing, introducing surgical stuff right now at this point. So many things are changing. As a result of that, we are looking into what is definitely called fourth industrial revolution, and we have already entered that phase, and we are really making strides over here. One thing that I always question here is, is wisdom catching up with the pace of technology? And I have to say no. I have to say no. This is primarily because we are not learning at the rate we should. If technology is changing every 18 months, which is what Murphy's Law and Moore's Law is trying to tell us, then are we actually getting something every 18 months? We should be doing it faster so that we are ready to keep pace with the technology that is changing, keep pace with the businesses that are changing. But we are not. When was the last certification somebody earned? That was 6, 7 years back. Well, you are now in a Jurassic era. You're not in the digital era at all. So you need to come to what is changing and stuff like that constantly. Unfortunately, that is the case. And let's take the story of the data in time. I'll give you a simple example. There was a long period of time, world wars were happening, right? In 1940s, 50s, 60s, during that time frame, there was, we have seen two world wars. And one of the basic things that people said is they looked at the planes that returned from the Air Force, field operations. They studied where the bullets were hitting the plane, and were evaluating, oh, we have to make this particular plane better wherever the bullets are hitting the plane, because that's where it's constantly being hit, and so it's not able to fly, right? That's what many people thought, right? But what someone came as a data scientist did, and this is not something today that we are all calling data scientists, but someone basically came back and said data can be used to tell whatever you want to tell, but is this what the data tells us? And that person came and said, maybe the planes are returning when they are getting hit in these areas. The planes that are getting hit in other areas are never even returning. That means they are gone. We should not be strengthening where the bullets hit the plane. Rather, we should be strengthening where the bullets hits are not seen, because those planes, we don't even have them. So it's not the presence of data that is important. It is also the absence of data that is equally important. But what do? We look at the data, we crunch them, we do statistical analysis and stuff like that, and we are moving forward, right? So data can be used to tell whatever story you want to tell. But is that what data is telling you? That's where data scientist comes. We don't want data analysis, but we also want to look a lot more than what data is telling. Let's take a look at some of the agile failure patterns. This is from my several transformation journey experiences that I have had. Unfortunately, I won't give the names of any companies or industries like that. But when you look at that at the very team level, we are looking at task oriented and overburdened team. Even now people come and ask me, can I have 5 extra stories that is getting pulled? What is the number of stories I should pull? No, you don't ask me that questions at all, because we are basically, as part of my iteration planning, we are discussing, can you commit to this? You tell me whether you can commit or not. I shouldn't be forcing these number of stories, these number of velocities. The second one, I'm going to compare the team members, like, Sriram and Kailash and Mayur. Let's say, we are all part of our team. I'm going to compare how many stories did Sriram deliver, how many points did Sriram deliver compared to Kailash, compared to Mayur. No, it's a team effort. To me, team stands as an acronym. Together, everyone achieves more. We're not looking at individual performance, because now you are bringing your individual HR principles and things like that and say, is this person ready for promotion? Is this person ready for more money? And that kind of thought process is put on the teams. That's not agility in the first place to begin with. The next one is failure to build team commitment. We somehow expect that the teams are going to be automatically self-organized. That's one of the fundamental principles behind agility, right? But you need to form, storm, norm, perform. You are expecting them already to be a performing stage, but you have not formed them, stormed them, and normed them. This is like expecting my child, 10-year-old, to actually graduate with a college degree. That's unacceptable, right? The next one is going to be neglect of technical excellence. Technology is a commodity. Yes, today technology has been used to create new avenues of business channels and profit centers and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, technology is the one that is constantly getting replaced. It's not the business. The business model remains the same. It's a technology that is supporting it. That's one of the reasons why, under the value chain of Porter, we basically say technology as an enabler, right? But we are not looking at that. The next one is agile practice without principles, and this is what I call as framework hopping. Yeah, I tried PMI, PMBOK approaches, that's not working. So I tried agile, now that's not working. I'm moving to Scrum, I'm moving to Spotify, I'm moving to Less, I'm moving to Safe. But the principles are pretty much the same. People come back and say, oh, we don't want project management principles, we want to use agility and iterative and incremental. Well, let's take a look at PMBOK. One of the foundational principles from PMBOK says rolling wave planning, progressive elaboration. We took those words, we need to make it attractive. So I don't want to use the word rolling wave, I wanted to use releases. I don't want to use progressive elaboration. I want to use iterative and incremental. But foundational principles are pretty much the same, right? But we forgot about that and we are just practicing. I went and attended a webinar. This is what we have to do now. The reason why we are failing is because we are not practicing safe. We are not using disciplined agile. But you need to come down with the concept of the right principles. If you don't understand the principles, you are never going to move forward. But why is the team structured this way? If you look at that, the management and leadership, inconsistent and siloed adoption. I am using agility, I'm using agile or Scrum or whatever it is, and then I move into the marketing department. They come and say, oh, we cannot operate in your thing because we are not on the same page. I am a semiconductor person. I created the semiconductor board, but then when I tried to put it as part of my Tesla vehicle, I had to also start having the discussion with the team that is cutting the engine and putting it there, because that mechanical engineering work has to be supported by your semiconductor electronic work. And if those two things are not matching, your engine weight actually sits on the PCB and breaks it. Now you're saying like, oh, it's not my problem, it's your problem. This is what we try to avoid, the men versus machine kind of a problem. I don't mean men in any um, a gender specific way. It's just a men and machine is the usual standard problems that people normally talk about. So men and machine problem is what we try to avoid with what we call as currently DevOps. Development should see the operation side of it. Operations should see the development side of it. This is where the shift left, shift right are coming in. But we already talked about this as part of PDCA. Deming cycle, plan, do, check, act. In fact, Deming himself came back and said it's no longer PDCA, it is supposed to be PDSA, Plan, Do, Study, Act. But we forgot about the study. We still are remembering what the original proposal was several years back, and we're not focusing on what people are continuously telling because we don't have time for that. And if we don't have time for this, time doesn't have any capacity to accommodate it in their life cycle as well. Weak product strategy. One of the important things that I go back and ask, just before this meeting started, I was having a discussion. We were having a discussion about roadmap. I asked, what is your product strategy? What is your roadmap looking like? And they scratched the head. Well, wait a minute. We are agile. We look only 2 weeks ahead. Is that what agility is telling? That's not right, because we need to have a product goal. We need to have a release goal. We need to have an iteration goal. So agility is not necessarily a token for anybody to do anything, right? The next one is cultural conditioning. I'm not talking culture in terms of the exact way of how geography cultures are working, but we as a team culture, we as an organizational culture, I have to change into we, that is called a group. And once the group changes into the project objective, that's when we are called a team. So you can no longer come and say, I'm a QA person, I am an engineering person, I am a creative artist, I am a architect. No, all these things are supposed to be working together. You may have your own responsibilities, but you still are working towards the common theme. And that cultural conditioning has to be present by everybody, right? Even that is not promoted within the team by the management and leadership, we are not able to move forward. Finally, lack of executive commitment. This is one of the biggest problem. Product owner is supposed to be dedicated. What part of dedicated people do not understand when they say this person is also working on this, that, and stuff like that. And this person is constantly moving around, not available for the team. And the same person takes on, I'm a product owner as well as the scrum master. So which part of the equation are you playing? Are you playing the product owner role or a scrum master role? So these are all problems that we create. And now we come back and say agile fails. Agile did not fail. We failed agile. Project management did not fail. We failed project management. So in my articles, I talk about why practice created a non-existent theory and then blame the theory for it. Waterfall exists only in people's mind. It never existed in theory to begin with. But that's the reason why agile is a teenager. It's been there for two decades now. It started in 2001, agile as a manifesto, but agility is still a toddler. If we come back and say working software over comprehensive documentation, why so many books have been written about it, so many articles have been written about it, and we still are struggling, right? And the next one is the individual's focus. What does the individual want? Hygiene factors. In the project management world, we talk about motivation, right? One of the important things is if I give you a salary today, you will be happy today, you will not be happy tomorrow. If I give you a 10% increment today, you'll be happy today, you will not be happy for the rest of your life, because life moves on. And what are some of the things that are motivating you intrinsically and extrinsically? I need to understand that. But what are people trying to come and ask me? Sriram, I'm a project manager, I want to become a scrum master. I'm an account manager, I want to become a product owner. Should I become a product manager or a project manager? Everything depends. This is the whole equation that we are talking about, the individual level, team level, at the enterprise level. This is my own thing that I created. This is the information that we are all talking about. How many of us can go back and say, I know about risk enough, I know about 4IR enough, responsive design, user experience, design thinking? How many of us can put our name on these things, depending upon where we come from, and say, of all these 20 different things, I have these things. But this is how it's getting built up. If I want to be in the team coach level, I need to be able to understand all these things, not necessarily be expert at that. I'm not saying like you have to know how to, integrate Jenkins with your source code, but you should know what Jenkins is, because that's what the world is moving forward. Lack of knowledge is not going to be good. And I always tell one thing: ignorance is not an excuse. You need to spend the time, because when I grew up, there was no such thing as internet. There was no such thing as YouTube. There was no such thing as massively online open university colleges. Now, pretty much, everything is at your fingertips. I can ask Alexa to play that stuff and Siri to find the stuff. But all those things have been automated for me. All those information is now available to me. But what am I doing to consume these information? Right? So not enough focus on Kaizen mindset, continuous improvement. That's a mindset that we have to develop. What can I do to make tomorrow better? Right? That needs to constantly happen. Now, when you look at the world, accelerating time to market, that's what is constantly coming up. The business team comes and says, well, we need to accelerate the stuff and get the feedback from customers and stuff like that. On the other hand, let's make sure that we are having a good cadence where we are delivering stuff. It's not about 1 week or 2 week or 3 week. Amazon, if you look at Amazon's iteration length, it's 15 minutes. One iteration, from iteration planning to stand up to review to retrospective, everything happens in 15 minutes. So they end up giving 4 iterations every hour and 32 iterations every day. And we come back and say, well, our iterations are 2 weeks long. According to Amazon's cadence, we are like 30, 40, 50 years behind. But should we? Amazon has different capabilities. Amazon has different things, but we don't have that. So we need to measure ourselves based upon our own yardstick, not on somebody else's yardstick. Sometimes people come and ask me, Sriram, I don't know how much I can do to be you. Don't be me, be you. Because if everybody in the world is me, then the world is a boring place. We want all of you to become yourself, measure yourself against your own yardstick. But that's the reason why I always say, don't be the weakest link in your team, because together everyone achieves more, and your team stands based upon your ability to contribute, right? But what are we talking about in the middle? Let's reduce the risk. And if you look at my patterns that I talked about, risk is all over the place. That's what we are constantly looking for. I want to reduce the risk in my cadence so that I'm having a predictable time to market delivery. That's what people are looking for. So how do I bridge this gap? How do I bridge this gap? We think we are solving all these things by Agile and DevOps. Are we? Let's ask ourselves the questions. If you look at reasons for going Agile, according to the State of Agile survey, when we time box, what are we actually reducing? The amount of risk that can happen in that particular 2 weeks, because you are able to predict these are the 10 user stories. These 10 user stories are impacted by this particular item. This is the reason why the backlog is called risk adjusted prioritized product backlog. It's not just backlog. It's not just product backlog. It's not just prioritized, but it's risk adjusted prioritized product backlog. Of course, that's a mouthful. So we don't want to use that. We come back and say, it's called backlog. Now we are creating confusion. Is it a product backlog? Is it the release backlog? Is it the sprint backlog? Is it the iteration backlog? They are all the same. It's just a view of how much risk, how much priority, how much refinement has happened. But we forget about all those things. So the whole idea of time boxing is to limit the amount of risks that impacts a specified number of stories that you are committing. And this is the reason why I go back and ask, I'm not for or against any particular tool, but, people will say, I'm using monday.com for my product, my Scrum work, or Jira, Atlassian. I go back and ask these questions like, where are the risks? 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 W What were the risks that you used to actually say this is more priority and this is less, less severe? It's in somebody's head. Can I automate what is in somebody's head? Will I get transparency into somebody's head when that person walks away? So we say transparency, inspection, adaptation are the empirical pillars, but we are not even demonstrating that. That is the reason why we are not able to cross-functionally align with other people, be productive, and impact quality. The data tells that very clearly. If I've been monitoring this for since it started, like the version, one now, digital AI and stuff like that. I picked up the last 5 years and I dropped 2020 because 2020 was primarily focused on COVID, right? When you look at this 2018, 2019, 2021, 2022 reports is already out, but pretty much they dropped all these factors because they are telling like, okay, we are constantly reducing, so let's not even bring these things anymore. So 2022 dropped all these things. But when you look at this, accelerating software delivery by limiting the number of days available in a time box, I'm saying like I will increase the software quality. Am I? We are skipping. We are not able to keep up with the pace, and we even 2 week pace. Forget about 1 year, 2 year, wide roll, waterfall level thinking, all those things. Even in 2 week sprints, we are not delivering as we expected to make our commitments to. Manage changing priorities, it's marginal. It's a 2/3, not even hitting the Pareto principle. We are not even getting to the 80% mark, right? Increasing productivity, it's not increasing at all. What is productivity? Doing more for the same amount of work, right? We are not productive. And better business IT alignment is around 50%. So we come and say DevOps, but we are not seeing shift left or shift down. We are not dancing the dance that we are telling. So everything is theory in our head, not necessarily the practice. None of these frameworks are supposed to be theoretical. Finally, increase software quality. Every product that we are releasing is having less than 50% of quality that we are planning. Kailash, you have a question? You raised your hand.
So Sriram, I just want to check with you and confirm here the gray bar of the histogram shows year 2021, right?
Right.
Yeah, so I think there was a bit correction on that graph because 2021 shows represented by the gray bar, 2019 represented by the orange bar, and 2018 represented by the maroon or the red.
Yeah. Correct. Okay, cool.
So
okay,
I think some people will not able to get the graph very correctly. So that's a small correction. We just
sure, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. We'll do that. We'll make the correction. So let's take a look at engineering practices, agile engineering practices, right? All these terms, I won't go into the details, but unit testing, coding standard, continuous integration, we know all these things. We know all these things. But when you look at these things, we are not maintaining the momentum that we need. Unit testing, we've been talking about unit testing for more than 3 decades. We should be 100%, 98%, around that mark, but we are still margining in 74, 69. Why? Because we think, oh, testing is tester's responsibility, QA's responsibility. It's not my responsibility. Quality is everyone's responsibility. QA by design, quality by design, that is what we keep talking about. But we're not remembering those things, and we are telling like, this is your responsibility, this is my responsibility. No, this is our responsibility. If the product does not get released correctly and it is not meeting the requirement, it's not you failed or I failed, we failed. That is what agility is, but we are not ready for agility in the first place to begin with. Nothing in the project management came back and said, if something failed, it's because of developers. Nothing in PMBOK. Go back all the way to PMBOK version 1 and see if there is one line that tells me if something failed, it's because of testers, not because of project managers, not because of engineers, architects, designers, but because of testers. If you find that one line, you come and tell me. So what are we trying to tell over here? Everything is behind schedule. Every one of them is not necessarily even hitting the mark that they need to. How do you expect quality then? Right? So where is the impact of all these engineering practices on the business value? How does the company generate value? Because I'm sure you might have heard, me as well as Kailash, repeat these things. It's not the outputs that matters; it's the outcomes that we generate, because it's the outcomes that generate into benefits and finally as value. So we need to always think value. This is the reason why we come back and say
Sorry, I'm
minimum
I'm I'm
viable
actually
product.
I didn't mean to disturb, but exactly this is the same thing that Kailash also taught in my PGMP. Great points, and this is what I explain at work to people, that it's not just your what you are delivering, but make sure that there are benefits, and then the outcome, and then the degree of benefit. And then I actually went back to the notes by Kailash and then referred to it when I was explaining it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ruchita, for voicing that thought process here. I'm glad it is resonating again. And these things are present right from day one. It's not that we are all coming something new here. This has been present, but we have limited attention span to understanding what they are. We don't want to spend time. And I even tell PMP people that have these things. I go and ask them, like, what is the most important domain? When you talk about this, integration is listed at the beginning. Why integration at the beginning? We talk about scope, schedule, cost as the iron triangle, and continue to move forward. But why integration? Integration is about change. So change has been present right from day one. And you come and tell me, oh, Agile comes and says, embrace changes faster and stuff like that. Just because you say the word change does not mean that you are ready for change. You need to have a sense of urgency according to the Carter's principle of, 8 changes, sense of urgency, and then institutionalized change. Those are the bookends, right? Again, if I go into that one, that'll be a different seminar about change management. So I'll focus here. So it's really ready for change. We need to change at this point. So how do we bring change here in this particular phase? Because I'm not focusing on what agility says, what Scrum says. I'm not talking about that. I'm basically basing everything based upon my own experiences, and say, all right, what is the value alignment? When you say value, what are we talking about? Right? So let's take a look at this in a simple quadrant here. One is the product strategy and one is the market strategy. I'm sure, Rachita, you're going to go crazy here, so please hold yourself. Okay. So when you look at the product strategy and the market strategy, let's take a look at existing products, future products, current customer segments, new customer segments. Right? Here, we are trying to expand the products and services with the current stuff. And this is where we are trying about the Moscow, like, what are the must to do and what can I add additional? How can I keep the customer? Because it's very important for, we spend a lot of time getting the customer. We need to make sure that we retain the customer. Correct? And that's where we are trying to focus repeatedly on. This is important for a product roadmap to keep, right? And the next one is for the same existing products, repurpose the same products for different things, for different market segments. So how do I take this particular product and put it into a different country, different market segment? So if you take an example of, a drug, because I'm trying not to use the software product for all the examples. If you take an example of a drug, the drug for the headache that you take may not necessarily be the right one for a child. So how do I actually create that one for a pediatric dose versus an adult dose versus a teenage dose? And how do I make sure that the prescribing information is communicating that information correctly? And what level of symptoms I will have to watch? I can't go and tell a child, a 2-year-old child, and say, are you having headache? He or she is going to only cry. And the intensity of cry is going to determine what level of pain we have. Right? So how do we repurpose this information? We are not coming up with new information, but how do we repurpose this information? People driving on the left-hand side versus people that are driving on the right-hand side. Elevators with braille readings. These are all things that we have to come up with. These are new means by which existing people are existing products are getting serviced to the new segments. That's where we come back and start looking at the demographic segments and other areas. Now, when you look at the future products, what does the future want? Maybe the current customer says, I am done with this. How many of us went to Steve Jobs and said, I really needed a camera in the iPhone? Nobody went and told him that. Nobody went and told Bill Gates, we need what is called a personal computing operating system. Nobody went and said there needs to be a graphical interface, but people observe how you are doing, what you are doing. And in lean management, we call it Jamba Jambuchu, a Jamba walks, management by walking around. It's not about how you design the product to be used, how actually the product is used. And this is what I published in my article called Parag. If the product that you have in your hand, software, tangible or intangible product, if it has voice and it became alive and talked to you, what would that product talk about? And that's what my Parag model is, right? That's exactly what we are talking about. What are they not telling us that we need to capture in mind so that we are creating a new product or service? That's how GPS was born. That's how maps were born, right? Pretty much anything and everything that you are using, who articulated the need for it? But we started consuming it. Oh my God, without that, we could never live. Today, if I take the phone away from you and say, how did you go ahead and live a couple of days? It's going to be very difficult. But guess what? We have all lived that. When I landed in the United States, there was no cell phone. We only have to use the pay phones. Now, if I give a pay phone and say, use the pay phone, many people are scratching their head. What do you mean? Can I not surf the net here on my pay phone? Right? As the industry changes, as the market demographic changes, we need to come with new products. Are we doing that? That means we need to put our, not only the power skills, but the strategic business acumen, which is another aspect of it, the PDA talent triangle. And we need to lead them. Sometimes the market is going to, not necessarily accept it. When you come and say, here is your iPhone, you instead of paying, 1,000 rupees for this, you have to pay 1 lakh. Why do I need this? But I need to market it. I need to actually bring this knowledge to you. What is the important to you? How your life is going to be totally useless or less valuable for other people. So I need to make the case for you. This is the reason why we said as a user, as a persona. There is a reason behind why we created that user story format. As a user, I would like this so that I get this benefit. So the value to what you will do is getting connected. The who is getting connected with the what and the why. And the tasks, risks, all those things become your test cases. All those things become your how. But we write user stories as a user. What kind of a user? As a mobile user. What kind of a mobile user? Knowledgeable, non-knowledgeable, technical, non-technical, blind, not blind, vision impaired. What kind of a user are we talking about when we say as a mobile user? Right? We're not qualifying the persona. We're just using the format because we have limited time to understand these things. The most important thing here is value integration. You as a product owner, you as a member of an agile team has to be having your feelers in all these places. When you develop your product, whether it is a website or whatever it is, did you go and tell your outside stakeholders, your doctor, your daycare worker, your school teachers, and tell them like, this is a product that I have developed. Please take a look at this. Give me your feedback. And we talk about chaos monkey and all those things, but we are not actually playing these things, right? This is very important. And now let's take a look at what is therefore a product management, because we said like why disciplined agile is important for product and project management. I'm setting the context as I'm moving forward. When you look at product management, it's not just having a strategy. It's just not having a prioritized roadmap. It's thinking about how the user interface will be designed, how the product itself will be developed, which means the actual developers architecting the product, with the 4S principles like security, stability, sustainability, and scalability. All those principles have to be thought through in the product development. Then the positioning, what is the message I want to give? As part of every release, every sprint that you are releasing, what is the message you are trying to tell the end user? It's not a bunch of user stories, but what does the bunch of user stories tell you? What's the story you are trying to tell by releasing these 10 things? Can I live without that? People are not able to articulate. One thing that I have established Agile Center of Excellence, because my group was, PGMO, right? Program Management Office. I had a lot of Scrum Masters, product owners into my group. And the one thing that I will always ask is, every 2 weeks, I'm giving salary from my budget to you, which means you receive the value. Did I receive the equivalent value by this sprint, in this sprint? So if I gave, $100,000 collectively to all of you, or 10 lakh collectively to all of you in these 2 weeks, the user stories that you receive, will that be good enough for 10 lakhs? Justify it. If you cannot justify that, how do you justify the user will come and buy it from you? Because now you are only cost of goods. You are a subtraction line item. Now you need to add some, marketing and, all those other things, and you have to mark it up, and now the cost is going to be high. If 10 lakhs is what I pay to, for this 2 weeks for all of you, and you cannot buy it from me, how would the end user is going to buy for, 12 lakhs? Pricing, packaging, go-to-market strategy, how do you do this, and customer insights, what kind of customers are, So we talk about NPS, net present score. What would that net present score be at the end of the iteration? On a scale of 1 to 10, will I give you a 10 as an end user for the product increment that you released? If not, was that your right priority? Right? So when you look at this whole thing, I need to know when to enter, what to do, when to exit. All these things are part of product management. This is one thing that people come and ask me next. Oh, that means if I need to grow up in my career, I should not be a project manager, I should be a product manager. I ask, what is the definition of a project? A temporary endeavor to deliver a unique product. Oh, product is now part of project. But projects are short-term, product or long-term. So projects is like that phoenix bird. It wakes up, does its work, and goes away. But as soon as a new increment is required, project comes up again, goes away. So they are like two eyes of the same face. Without one eye, you cannot see the depth of perception. A project manager, therefore, needs to understand the product. A product manager, therefore, needs to understand the project. A product manager need not necessarily be, transparent or transplantable, but a project manager is. The tricks of trade are different. So let's take a look at project management lifecycle then. I'm not using agile lifecycle, lean lifecycle, waterfall lifecycle. I'm not using this. I'm calling this as a project management lifecycle. Okay. So an idea comes up from somebody. Once an idea comes up, we are selecting the appropriate amount of, evaluation. And this is where we go back and say, what is the return on investment, cost benefit ratio, internal rate of return, present value, payback period. So all these things we are using to come back and say, is this project good to move forward with? All right. We make a solid case. We have a value statement, and now we are moving forward. That means, do we have the right people in this company to do this? Do we have the actual competencies and skills on these people? Maybe they are available, but they are not available for this project. Maybe they are available, but they don't have the skill set for this project. This is when you go back and say, should I procure from elsewhere? Should I actually organically grow? Depending upon that, it's going to have a cost implications. Now we are putting the contracting thoughts like time to materials, cost reimbursable, fixed price, all these things are coming up. I'm not using the terms here, but these things are all coming up right there. Right from there, we have formed the team and we are kicking off. But they're not going to be ready day one. We need to actually groom them. And this is part of progressive planning. right? As we progressively plan, first phase, which is 3 months or 6 months, we get to this particular market, and that's our major milestone, because that's where funding comes up. Like, how much money will a sponsor be able to pay? They probably have some amount of funding, and then, as the product gets released, it may be retained earnings. It may be other ways, the product itself generates money, and so you are constantly using the product to pay for its own development, right? So continuous improvement comes up, and now you are monitoring and controlling. Okay, is not just the project, but also the product that got released to the market as part of your project, right? So now you are evaluating: is it generating money? Is people buying it? Some are buying, some are not buying. Why some are buying? Why some are not buying? Or is the project technically sustainable there? Why is it not technically sustainable? Did we use the wrong tech stack? What else can we do to monitor? What of indices we should actually monitor? So now, as a result of this, you are looking to the operational launch. As you are progressively planning, this product is pretty much ready. Everything is integrated, everything is working together. I'm trying to push major releases, right? As you are doing that, you are doing additional health checks, more and more health checks. As these health checks are coming up, new ideas are coming. So this is the reason project management is a life cycle. You don't start with an idea, and once the idea is done, you are gone. If you are a good project manager, you will continue to keep the project ongoing. If the project is constantly ongoing, the input from the operations is going to serve as your idea for the kickoff. This is when we say a project manager initiates. Oftentimes people come and say, the project charter is given to me. No, the project charter is only identifying you as the project manager to spend organizational resources. You may have to put a project charter yourself because you formed the idea, right? When you do all these things are repeatedly coming. Continuous skill assessment. People are people. They have life in their way. This is when emotional intelligence, active listening comes up, and you are paying attention to how they are adapting in their life, how they are continuously improving, who I should continuously keep on the bus, who I should not. And as part of that operational excellence motivation, training and repeated training and repeated identification of when to exit the product, right? So choice, therefore, is good. And in fact, it is really required. Not from the way we are operating, but every industry has adopted some form of project management, some form of agility, and some form of lean, and they have been practicing it. So we need to basically understand what are the retrospective, what are the lessons learned, what are the successes, what are the failures, not just from your project, but all projects in your company and all projects in your industry and all other projects not even in your industry. Those are all our learning feeders. We need to go to webinars, to conferences, to read books. And I always ask people, if project management is a skill set that you can transplant from one industry to another industry, and if you're in IT industry, did you read about construction industry? Did you read about healthcare industry? What kind of regulations do you know in healthcare? What kind of ISO standards do you know about in this particular domain that you want to be an expert at? If we don't, how are we demonstrating continuous learning? How are we demonstrating what is happening? And we repeat the mistakes that somebody else already did and failed and succeeded. And now we are trying to learn our own mistakes. Right? So this is where Disciplined Agile comes in. And it says it's a toolkit. Disciplined Agile is the first one that said it's a toolkit, not safe, not scaled agile approaches like Scrum or Scale and stuff like that, but it's a toolkit, which means these are all the different things that many people have tried, and I'm going to consolidate them and give it to you. You pick the right tool. So instead of telling do iteration planning, do daily stand-up, do reviews, do retrospective, if instead of giving 1 2 3 4, I said, like, these are all the things that you have available, you make it fit for your business process. And this is the reason why the focus is on disciplined. discipline. So let's take a look at what it is. So when you look at this, it is basically telling, context is important. What context we are using, what process, what level of risk management to actually include. If you are using priority and severity, that's okay for a normal IT business. But if you are talking about going into agile surgery, yes, I have been part of agile surgery. I'll be very honest with you on that thing. And there is a webinar I did on that one separately, but that's for a different day. So again, it is going back to say what level of risk, which means detectability is important. So this is when FMEA and those kind of methodologies are coming in. Now you are going and taking a look at guided continuous improvement. We have found out that people are not making themselves continuously improve. We need to give them. And this is one of the reasons why I am really proud to be associated with add-on, because we constantly keep on telling, add your skills, add on to your skills, right? So if you are a PMP certified, go for PGMP, and not immediately with the certification mindset, but go more, learn more, go discipline agile, go take a look at this. And maybe you may have to come back and say, Sriram, can you put together a risk management program for us? Because I'm really interested. If you ask and you build the door, opportunities will knock. And that's where guided comes in. The next one is going to be a process tailoring workshop. Not everything is going to be the same. We need to do something differently for different people. Now, how do you practice that? We talk in PMP and PGMP and all those things, joint application development, joint application requirements gathering. Have you done that? If you have not done that and your company is not giving you an opportunity for you to do that, where will you practice? Who came and asked Kailash or Sriram or Mayur, I would like to be part of your next webinar or next session where I can facilitate such a discussion, right? That's the process tailoring workshop. The next one is enhanced retrospective. First of all, let's make sure that the retrospective is a lot more about lessons learned. Nothing in the project management book of knowledge came and said, let's do lessons learned at the end of the project, which is the closure. That's a final recap. But nobody said it has to be only done at that point. But we practiced it incorrectly and we called it even post-mortem. I don't like the word post-mortem. Post-mortem means after the person is dead or no longer living, we are going to give. What's the point in giving an improvement to somebody who is no longer in the company, who is no longer in the project? What kind of improvement will that person do? So lessons learned should be every day. In fact, in my daily stand-up, I have moved away. I don't even say, what did you do yesterday? What are you going to do today? What is your impediments to work today? Instead, I go back and say, what did you learn from yesterday's work? What are you planning to learn from today's work? What are your impediments to learning? This is one of the reasons why I say, don't count the days, but make the days count. Right? So we need to enhance our lessons learned. And finally, our enhanced coaching. Every one of us needs some amount of coaching. In the coaching engagement, you know your domain more, but you are looking for some of those bigger things that you are not necessarily connecting with. And you need to be a good enough person from a facilitation, training, mentoring and coaching perspective before you can come back and do certain things like a coaching, right? So this is what an agile discipline agile toolkit comes, and it allows you to enable to scale. And this is one of the reasons why this is a better tool compared to SAFe, for instance. Yes, I am also SAFe program certified, and it requires certain prescriptive thing that needs to be followed. And this is one of the reasons why many people come and say, SAFe looks to me more like, somewhat agile waterfall. People have said these things. But if you enable to scale, you recognize 4 important quadrants, which means strengthen the core. Don't be a weakest link. In order for you to be productive, you need to strengthen the core. And that comes in 4 important domains. Remember, I talked about those individual skill set. It recognized it in a different way. And my adaptation was long before then, the discipline agilers. And then it says goal driven. What is your company's goal? What is your product goal? Accordingly, adopt and adapt. not just your success, your team's success, your company's success, but your industries and your success of non-industries. And oops. And finally, it is also focusing on principles. What are some of those foundational principles that I have to have? I'm not going to worry about motivating my team. I won't lead my team. I just gave them, I'm going to walk away. It's their responsibility to deliver. No. This is one of the reasons why I always think, P in project management is for people management. If people are out, there is no project, right? And finally, going into the scaling factors. How do you scale? What are the things to keep in mind when you scale? It gives you those dimensions and say, make it your own, right? And both these elements, product and project, are supporting them. This is not for product management or this is not for project management. Both these things had to be present in order for this rocket to lift off, right? So let's take a look at one by one, each and one of them means. So they recognize the 4 layers. When you recognize the 4 layers, this is what Disciplined Agile Toolkit comes. It comes and says you need to have the foundation, which is like having a good mindset about how to manage people and stuff like that. And understand what makes people tick, what is negotiable, what is non-negotiable, when do you think your team members will be happy, what is your definition of happiness, what makes them sad. And Agile, do you understand the basics of Agile to begin with? And this is where we go back and say, let's make sure that you know how to form the team, storm the team. And people come and say, oh, forming, storming, norming are all, associated with project management, but we are Agile. Are you really self-organized completely on day one that you can perform without your product manager or product owner? If you're going to be a Scrum Master, are you able to actually look at, being a yin and yang? Pull the product owner, push the product owner, pull the product team, push the product team. Are you able to play both those roles correctly? That's the reason why Scrum Master is actually an Agile coach, right? Lean. What are the foundational principles behind Lean? Proper cadence, eliminate flow, eliminate waste, improve flow. Serial. Just because something needs to be done in a sequence does not necessarily mean that it is not good. If you want to cook, you need to cut the vegetables. I can't come and say, I'm not going to cut the vegetables because that is serial thinking. I'm going to start, doing it in a different order. But what is considered serial and why it should be, a linear dependency. And finally, how do I make sure that, we are continuously wowing, working better? And now we are moving into the disciplined DevOps. And pick what applies to you here. Security may apply, may not apply. Data management may apply, may not apply. Release may apply, may not apply. So what works here? Disciplined DevOps. Don't go and say, well, disciplined DevOps is part of the next one, so we really have to do it. But I don't even have a software to deliver in the first place to begin with. I'm not building a software. I may be building a drug, the COVID vaccine. I was helping some of the teams to actually put together the clinical lab where the COVID vaccine was actually being, designed and developed. From my end point, I need to make sure that, there is a proper safety and security procedures for the drug coming in, for the drug raw materials coming in, raw materials going out, proper storage. And those are connecting with different people. So that is disciplined DevOps. Are you able to think shift left and shift right? It need not be a software thinking. As you are looking at this, it is looking into the other things like what are the business operations that you need to understand? What are the research and development that I have to focus on? What are the portfolio program management concepts that I need to bring in? Because your project may be part of a program or a portfolio. So now you are going and looking at all these things one by one. Level up, which is value stream. As the value stream is getting built up, you are looking at the discipline enterprise where, I'm looking at bigger things in portfolio management. We talk about enterprise architecture. Why we talk about enterprise architecture? Not because PGMP and PFMP is telling that we have to do it, but primarily because that is really required. That's the reason why PGMP and PFMP are including that. asset management. Who use your asset? Licenses that you use for your software is an asset, not necessarily people. So what are the people resources and non-people resources? The facilities, equipments, materials, infrastructure, and supplies. So you are bringing all these things into focus over here. So legal should think agile. HR should think agile. Operations should think agile. Otherwise, we are not agile. It's like we all want to go and see a movie in a movie theater, but everybody wants to see a different movie in the same theater at the same time, sitting next to each other. Good luck with that. They haven't tried that, it won't work, right? So when you look at this, this is how people are thinking. Oh, okay, these groups are talking, these groups are talking. This is where shift left and shift right becomes siloed. But technically speaking, a good product manager, a good project manager, a good product manager, product owner, program manager, portfolio manager are doing this. This is one of the reasons why I say it's not shift left and shift right. It's also shift up and shift down. Look at project management, communication. It's not telling, manage left, manage right. It also says manage up and manage down. But we forget that. We work in our own silos. I don't talk about portfolios. I don't talk to my, CEO. So why do I have to worry? But they are talking in their own way. Your product, in what way your product is contributing to your income statement? What line item is your product part of? Are you part of cash flow? Which cash flow statement part are you in? So we need to think these things through, because they use a different language. They may be talking the money language and you may be talking the technical language, and we are not, connecting. We need to, that's the reason why we are talking about the T skills, the cross-functional skills that we need to have. Every one of them, right? That's what recognizing the 4 layers are, how you are moving up and down, right? When you look at the goal-driven approaches, we are taking a look at, okay, how do I make sure that you are doing the proper inception? Inception is not, or initiation is not just putting together a project charter, but it's starting to think a little bit more about how do I transition to the next stage, which is how do I form the team? What does agility mean within the enterprise? How do I explore scope? So we are trying to go through all these things. And then we are also building the common foundation. How do you grow team members? Which means capacity, transition, succession. When do I take work? When do I say no to additional work? How do I coordinate activities, whether it is a virtual team or a non-virtual team, whether it is a procurement team or a internal team, whether it is a legal team or a medical team or a regulatory team? How do I do these things? And foundation, when you look at this, address risk. We can no longer come and tell, well, we are agile and we don't talk about risk. That means you don't know agile, right? So this is what we are trying to come and say. These are the, think of this as the process groups that we are talking about. But we are not trying to come and say, this is how you should do it. We are telling like, these are all the things that are available to you. You pick and choose. But what do I pick and choose? This is where, it spells down details. So I'm picking up this one important thing called improve quality here, this one little thing. If it comes and expands this as part of the process, it says, these are all the 4, important things that could contribute to this. And based upon different successes of different industries across the globe, these are all the things that people have found to be applicable and useful. So we are giving you all of them to you. Say, if you want to improve implementation, refactor code. If you want, refactor the database, accept the technical debt, rewrite it. So rewrite this. So now you are focusing on what do I do? What are some of these things that apply to me that do not apply to me? Similarly, there are sometimes, people put an order. If there is an order, we show them with the arrow. If there is no order, unordered list, then we actually do not show them. So we give these things to you. The expectation is not for you to remember by heart and dump it into the actual exam, but do you understand what do we mean by refactor code? Do we understand what we mean by, leverage common process assets? It changes based upon your organizational process assets, your enterprise environmental factors, right? Now, when you look at the principles, it comes and says these are the principles. Disciplined Agile believes in these principles, which means I want to delight customers, which means I need to understand what delights the customers. I want to be awesome. I want to come here and be awesome. It's no longer one of those, touchy mushy feeling alone. I'm giving definition. I want to be awesome. What is your definition of awesome? How do I bring my enthusiasm into the product? Which means maybe you have to learn something somewhere else and bring this information. Maybe you have to take, hey, this is what I learned from Sriram's webinar, done by add-on skills, and here is my thought process. Go talk to them about it, right? So context, being pragmatic, choice is good. All these things are really important principles. In fact, the choice is good is one of the principles that I mentioned before, because to me that brings everything else together. And maybe something else brings everything else together for you. And that's okay. But in order to demonstrate these principles, what are we promising each other? Create psychological safety. I won't make you feel unsafe. I won't yell at you. I won't, make you feel like, as soon as I come in, you want to leave the room, right? How do I do this? Improve predictability. I am coming and saying, Kailash, I have a challenge. Can you please help me with this? I don't wait for the next daily stand up. Instead, I am actually, as soon as the problem happens, I'm letting him know so that that person can make a corrective action or preventive action for me, rather than losing the day and coming back and, sitting for the daily stand up next. That's not what agility is, but that's how agility is being practiced. And finally, what are some of those guidelines? Be the change agent. How do you go and change? What do you have to change? In order for somebody else to change, first you need to be the change yourself too. Make sure that you are able to preach, walk the talk. So some of this validate our learnings. Apply design thinking. What are the four, the converging and diverging thoughts? The discover, design, develop, and deploy concept. Those are the 4 Ds of design thinking. So how do I bring these concepts and bring these things together? So what are the guardrails I'm putting for myself? As you put these things, and as you promote all the team members to put on these things, your team becomes better. As the organization sees your team doing better, they come and say, what are you doing differently than us? We would like to learn from you. So the organization gets better, the industry gets better. So one by one. So it's starting from, ground up as well. Right? When you take at scaling factors, it comes and tells you these are all different dimensions that you may have to look, because not all companies, not all business units, not all teams within the business units are going to be on the same scale. So team size. SAFe says, don't use SAFe if it's less than 50. But what if it's 10 people, 10 people, 10 people in different business units? That's why you don't look at the individuals alone. You look at the collective goal. So as the number of people increases, you have to come up with different strategies. Pick and choose different best practices that are being recommended. And as the company is geographically distributed from so close co-located to completely located in different countries in different time zone, right? And similarly, organizational distribution is the decision authority, but getting distributed in one unit, multiple units. So different types of stakeholders and stakeholder groups have to be brought in. And what is their level of current engagement? What is your desired level of their engagement? And we talk about this in project management too, stakeholder engagement assessment metrics. RACI. We talk about all these things. None of them is new. And these things, gold is always gold. Some of these things are really going to withstand its time, right? Skill availability. How willingly are you able to, learn your new technologies and move forward? If you are not, it's okay. Your comfort zone, it is you. But then as a business, the show must go on. So I have to find, transition planning and succession planning, because at any point you are a flight risk. Similarly, compliance. What is the level of compliance that is required? Medical, legal, financial, regulatory. Different industries have different requirements. What standards do you know in your own field? Can you name 3 to 4 standards that you are, really certified or have a certificate or have some knowledge about? Not just I know HIPAA, I know GDPR, I know SOX, I know. I'm not talking about that. But have you taken a webinar? Have you written an article? Have you taken a certificate or certification? That's what we are talking about. Now, solution complexity is the solution you are developing, in a single place, in a single product, or multiple product groups, or multiple ecosystems. What are we talking about? And the domain itself, when I mean domain, please don't think in terms of the technology domain. It is the domain of, financial domain, insurance domain. Because when you look at in finance, you could have banking, investment, insurance. All these things are, financial domain, but they all have different considerations. So what is the level of complexity that you are looking at within that domain? So multiple things are coming into play for you to evaluate, should I? And your company may be completely doing today fine, but suddenly it acquires, merges or acquires another company. Now the equation changes. New people, new teams, new sizes, new geographical distribution, new solutions or integrated solution. What do you have to do differently? Because you can no longer come and say, when a company A buys company B, we don't have a company A culture or a company B culture. We have a new company C culture. It's an integrated company culture. So the processes that work for company A, the processes that work for company B are not going to necessarily work. What is the integrated culture that needs to work? Right? That's what we are talking about in terms of scaling factors. So next steps. We talked about DASM, DASSM, and stuff like that. Disciplined Agile Scrum Master, Disciplined Agile Senior Scrum Master. So just wanted to give you some basic thoughts regarding what these things are. So if you are new to Agile, you're just picking it up or learning something and you attended something or you've done some experience, a little bit, but not much. In that particular case, DASM certification is a good choice for you because there's no experience requirement. It's only like, okay, you need to attend a 14-hour training. You have an exam of 50 questions that you need to finish in 90 minutes with 30-minute, introduction break and stuff like that. And then it's completely online and non-proctored. Whereas if you're experienced, you have a PMI ACP or you have a PMP and you want to actually, move on to the next level, then it is DASSM, Discipline Agile Senior Scrum Master. DASM is not a prerequisite for DASSM, but the knowledge of DASM is a prerequisite in DASSM. So here you need 2 years experience, and pretty much everything else is pretty much the same. So the experience plus the knowledge is what is really required over there in order for you to do that. PMI ACP is still present. PMI has not come and said we are going to move away from PMI ACP, primarily because PMI ACP brings a lot more broader spectrum of knowledge, like considers about lean, Kanban, safe, agile, Scrum, XP, less Nexus, many other things are coming into the PMI ACP. PMP is giving also a thinner version of what you need to know, basics of Agile to get moving. That's part of the PMP's Agile practice guide also. So that brings everything to the next steps that you can take on as to what you will be able to do. With that, I would like to, thank you, Kailash, Mayur, and everyone in Add-on Skills for giving me this opportunity to present. I very much appreciate it. And now I will open up for any questions and answers for me.